Okay, hi everyone. I hope you enjoyed the things that we've undertaken during your prelims. And now I welcome you to the midterm period for this semester. And at this point in time, you will be dealing about dactyloscopy. Anyway, in the previous session we talked about the different personalities as well as their contributions and overview about the terminologies pertaining to dactyloscopy, uh, personal identification, dactylomancy, dermatoglyphics, and others. And we were able also to identify the different traits characteristics. And at this point in time, we will now give emphasis or focus our discussion about the types of fingerprint patterns. Okay, so with this particular topic, it is expected that the student will be able to identify the types of fingerprint patterns and describe each pattern so that they will become well versed in the identification process. So as you can see on the slide, I have here the acronym ATRO-CDX. And this ATRO-CDX will serve as your guide to easily recall the types of fingerprint patterns. Okay, so accordingly, the acronym stands for the different types of fingerprint patterns. Okay, in capital letter A, it represents the plain arc. So, but before going through the different times, we have to recall that there are three families of fingerprints, which includes the arc, the loop, and the whorl. So, this three has its own characteristics also, or what we call requisites. And we start with the arc pattern. For the arc pattern, it consists of capital A and capital T. So, capital A represents the patterns for plain arc. Okay, that is for plain arc. And T is for tented arc. So whereas for the loop pattern, it has two kinds, of which it includes the R referring to radial loop and U for ulnar loop. And for the Whor patterns or the so-called Whorl family, it consists of W, which refers to your plain whorl, C, central pocket loop whorl, and D, double loop whorl, and X is for accidental whorl. So just like what I made mention a while back, that in the arc pattern, the percentage of appearance is 5%, loop is 60%, or in some other book, it would also give emphasis on 60 to 65%, and in Whorl pattern is 35%. So accordingly, we have here the different types of arc pattern. Let us go first with the plain arc. So what do you know about plain arc? Of course, by the name alone, you would think that it looks like an arc. And that is exactly the thing that would give you emphasis, or that would let you easily remember about a plain arc. So in a plain arc, you can see that the ridges will enter at one side, and there is an upward curve. Okay, it's like upward curve, and it would again exit to the other side. So this is the picture of a plain arc. So let us try to take a look about how the plain arc is being described. So it states in here that the ridges flows from one side to the other without recurving. So you already know about recurving rates. That it consists of loop, isn't it? Looping, or what we call recurving rates. But in this plain arc, you cannot see any recurving rates. It's only a slight upward curve. The curve is just slight, as you can see on the picture. So meaning this image would refer to an arc. it looks like an arc. This is what we call a plane arc. Did you get it? Okay. Aside from the plane arc, we also have what we call tented arc. In the tented arc, of course, we have again a keyword. So it looks like a tent. Why is it that it looks like a tent? Because there is an upthrust at the center. So, of which the formation now is like a tent. Okay, if you are going to build a tent, you have to provide a straight pole, and then it will look like a tent like this. So, same as true with what we call tented arc. Okay, again, this pattern tells that one or more ridges at the center forms an upthrust. This is what we call the upthrust. Okay, so to make a sufficient rise, giving the pattern of a tent. So again, the very simple statement that you could probably remember about tented arc is that it looks like a tent. Just like in plain arc, it looks like an arc. So this is the distinction from the tented and that of the plain arc. Okay, let us proceed with the loop pattern, of which, as to the percentage of appearance, it is 60%. That is why if you happen to see in a set of fingerprint patterns, majority or almost all patterns belongs to loop, whether it is ulnar or radial. But the greatest number of ulnar pattern, loop pattern that would occur in a set of fingerprints is mostly the ulnar loop. It's we do not often encounter the radial loop. Okay, so for loop pattern, of course, by the term alone, it consists of looping reeds, or what we call recurving reeds. So what are the different requisites of a loop pattern? Okay, it must have a delta. So if you happen to recall a delta, it is known as the outer terminus, and it is usually located at the point of divergence. Again, in number 2, it must have a core. When we talk about a core, we always remember that this is the inner terminus. Okay, so it is also known as the heart of the pattern area or the approximate center. Why is it that we need a core and delta in the loop pattern? Because these are our bases for the conduct of reeds counting. So aside from that, one thing that we could observe from a loop pattern is what we call the presence of a recurving reeds, or also known as looping reeds. If you try to recall again the illustration of a looping or recurving reeds, it looks like a paper clip, right? So this recurving reeds is present in this loop pattern. Okay. So aside from that, it must have a ridge count of at least 1. So if you happen to connect the core to the delta, and there is one recurving ridge or ridge that was touched by the imaginary line, then that could now be considered as a loop. At least 1. Okay, if there are 2 ridges that was touched by the imaginary line drawn from the core and the delta, that is still a loop pattern. So you have to remember that these are the requisites, and knowing that in this type of pattern, ridge counting is being applied. So for the arc pattern, ridge counting is not applicable because it has no core and it has no delta as well. Did you get the point now? Okay. So in the loop pattern, we have two types. Just like what I made mention a while back, that we have what we call radial loop. For you to be guided on how to determine whether it is radial or ulnar loop, you have to know where is the location of the fingerprint patterns, if it is at the right or if it is at the left. So in this particular pattern, we could see that this is a radial loop. Why? Because the slanting ridges moves towards the direction of the thumb. So these are your thumbs, right? Of which the bone, the inner bone that connects to the thumb is what we call radial bone. So if the flow of the ridges moves towards the direction of the thumb, that is what we call radial bone. So in here, assuming that this is your right, this pattern is located at your right thumb, then you have to place in there your right hand. So the point of divergence or the delta is being pointed out by the little finger, and the flow of the ridges moves towards the thumb, and that is what we call radial loop. Okay. So as mentioned a while back, that the radial bone is called as the inner bone of the forearm that runs to the wrist and the side where the thumb is located. So that is why I am showing you like this. This is the bone that extends to the thumb from the right and the left. Okay, this is the bone that extends to the left thumb, and this is what we call the radial bone. So another thing that we have to consider is the next type of loop pattern, of which it is being called as ulnar loop. Why? What is the basis of naming it as ulnar loop? Because the flow of the ridges moves towards the ulna bone, and ulna bone, if we talk about the ulna bone, is referring to your little finger. So this is also the bone that extends to the little finger and what we call ulna bone, this one. Okay, so of which in this picture, we can see that this is located at the right thumb. So if this is located at the right thumb, again, place your right hand, and knowing that the point of divergence or where the delta is located, it is the thumb that points out that particular area, and then it would go to the flow of the ridges go to your little finger. That is why it is being called as ulnar loop. So as per detail, a loop in which the downward slope or the slanting ridges runs towards the direction of the little finger. And that is what we call ulnar loop. Okay, so when we talk about Whorl patterns, we have to recall about WCBX. But before that, we have to know first the different requisites. And again, let us try to know about the percentage of appearance. It's 35%. In some other book, it would over 30 to 35%. So accordingly, in this type of pattern, ridge tracing is applicable. So why is it that ridge tracing is applicable and it's not ridge counting? Because it is in this pattern wherein we could locate two delta formations from the left delta and the right delta. So in ridge tracing, you have to trace from the left going to the right delta, and there are three types of ridge tracing. We have the I, that refers to inner tracing, M, meeting tracing, and O, outer tracing. So in Whor patterns, we have what we call plain Whor. Can you again recall What is the acronym representing a plane whorl? That is capital W. Okay, what about central packet loop whorl? It is represented by letter C. And double loop whorl is letter B. And accidental whorl is letter X. So these are the types of the whorl pattern. So let us take it one by one. How does a plane whorl looks like? Okay. So accordingly, with this particular image, you can see now the complete circuit. It is in circular formation. Okay. So circular formation. And what is the red line that was, or red mark that was indicated here? This red mark is an imaginary line that was used to connect the left delta and the right delta. And it is in this way that you could easily determine whether the pattern is a plane whorl. So these are the circuit. You happen to see in here the circuit. And with that, the line connecting the left delta to the right delta had touched the different circuits within the pattern area. And that is why it is being called as a plane whorl. So let us try to take a look at this slide. A plane whorl is a pattern consisting of two deltas and which at least one ridge makes a turn through one complete circuit. An imaginary line, the red mark that I was then telling a while back, drawn between the two deltas must touch across or at least one of the recurving ridges within the pattern area. So this is what we call the ridges that has been touched by the pattern, by the imaginary line. So it is circular in motion, formation. Okay, so let us take a look about central packet loop whorl. So by the term alone, packet, it means that it is located inside the innermost part of the whorl pattern. So, okay, let us take a look at this image. This is the circuit. You would notice that it is located in the innermost part. And this is what we call the delta. And if you try to connect it going to the right here, there is no circuit that has been touched by the imaginary line. So if you try to connect going there, so there is no circuit that has been touched. And that is why it is what we call, it is being called as central packet loop whorl. So by the term alone, or by the definition provided, it is a pattern which possesses two deltas, the left delta and the right delta, with core or more ridges forming a complete circuit which may be oval. So it is in oval formation, spiral, circular, or any variant of a circle. So your clue in here is that no circuiting ridge has been touched by the imaginary line if you will connect the left delta going to the right delta. Okay, now let's proceed with the different elements of a central packet loop whorl so that you will be guided and you would be given an idea in the identification of a central packet loop whorl. Okay, it states here that at least one recurving or obstruction at right angle. Okay, two deltas, no recurving ridges within the pattern area are touched or crossed by an imaginary line drawn between the two deltas. So there is an obstruction in here, right angle. You would see in here, that is why the circuiting ridge did not flow up to this part. Okay, so this is from the left delta going to the right. And there were no ridges that has been touched. And that is what we call central packet loop whorl. Did you get it? Are you comprehending with the discussion? Can you catch up? So anyway, that is why I am doing this video, so that you could go back and back and back at your own most convenient time for you to refresh and review. Now, we have the so-called double loop Whorl. It means that it consists of two loop formation. Okay, like this. It could be an S form. This is the loop in here. This is also the other loop. So this is the left delta, and in here is the right delta. So the requirement in here is that it tells us that this is a pattern consisting of two separate and distinct loop formations with sets of shoulder and two deltas. So meaning they have their own sets of shoulder. They are separate. Okay? They have two separate and distinct loop formation. Aside from the double loop Whorl, we also have here, from that particular detail, let us try to take a look also as to its elements. Okay, this is another type of double loop Whorl. It could also be like this. This is the first loop, which is separate from the other loop here. Okay, so the delta is located in here, and the other delta is in there. Okay, so the requirements or the elements tells us that there must be two separate loop formation, two separate and distinct shoulders, and two deltas. So aside from that, we also have what we call accidental Whorl. And accidental Whorl consists of two patterns. There are combination of patterns, okay? Just like this. Two patterns had combined. Okay, so accordingly, based on the definition or description of an accidental Whorl, it consists of a combination of two different types of pattern, such as a loop and a Whorl, a loop and a central pocket loop Whorl, or any combination of two different loop and Whorl type pattern, but it cannot be a combination of a plain arc with any other pattern area. It can have two or more deltas. So with the presentation of these different types of fingerprint patterns, you will now be guided with your laboratory activities, of which you are going to determine the types of pattern. We will also be having the recording of fingerprints, and your respective fingerprints would have its pattern, and you will be the one to identify it based on the patterns that were presented. Okay, so in addition also, the accidental Whorl has also its corresponding elements, that there is should be a combination, and the combination as an exemption is the plain arc. Two or more deltas, and of course, with these particular elements, you have to remember it so that you will be convinced as to what type of pattern is really being indicated in the fingerprint packs. Okay, so you have to be aware that there are different types of fingerprint patterns. There are three families: the arc, the loop, and the Whorl. And the different types: plain arc, tented arc, radial loop, ulnar loop, plain Whorl, central pocket loop Whorl, double loop Whorl, and accidental Whorl. Okay, so let us try to take a look also with the blockings. So what is then the importance of blockings in fingerprint identification? These symbols are then used to represent the different fingerprint patterns in a fingerprint card, because we cannot because the names, if we will indicate the names in the fingerprint card, it will be too long, or it's not easy, it's not nice to look at, that there will be written words. But that is why we have these symbols in blockings. Its patterns are also being represented by its respective symbols. Okay, so when we talk about blockings, it is the process of writing below each pattern the corresponding symbol of the fingerprint pattern. So in the backs of each fingerprint card, the boxes will accommodate the fingerprint patterns that will be recorded. And below that box, it is in there that we have to write the symbols. Instead of writing plain Whorl, you will just write capital W. And the rule in the blockings is also provided. So let us take a look at the rules. So we have in here the different fingerprint patterns and their corresponding symbols that are used in blockings. So one thing that you have to remember in here is that those patterns appearing at the index finger will be written in capital letters. While for the other fingers, just like the thumb, middle, ring, and index, a little, then you can use the small letter, but except for the plain Whorl, it will still remain as capital letter. And one thing more, instead of using small r or small u for radial loop and ulnar loop, you can also use a slant depending on the position of the slant now of the fingerprint patterns. So for example here, in plain arc, you would see that the symbol for plain arc, if it is at the index, is capital A. For the other, it is small letter A. So in index, it is capital T and other is small t. Then if the radial loop is located at the index finger, you represent that as capital R. So, okay, let us try to take a look at this. If the pattern is, the slanting ridges moves towards the thumb and it is at the right hand, this is the slant for a radial loop. But if it is at the left hand, if you happen to see this kind of slant, it is a radial loop. So for the ulnar loop, as usual for the index, capital U. For the other fingers, right hand, this is the slant that you would see at the right hand if it is an ulnar loop. But if it is at the left hand and it is an ulnar loop, this will be the slant. Okay. For the plain Whorl, it remains that it is capital W at the index and all the other fingers. For the central pocket loop Whorl, we can also establish a capital C at the index and small c at the other finger, and capital D at the index and small d at the other, and capital X also for the index and small x at the other fingers. So you have to be very careful in writing the blockings. If it is capital, you have to represent it as capital. And if it is small, you have to write it in small letters so that you will avoid mistakes. So ridge counting, just like what I made mention a while back, is applied to a loop pattern. Okay? However, for this session, we only covered about the types of fingerprint patterns and at the same time, the symbols in blocking. So this topic will again be discussed by another session. Okay, so I hope that you learned something with the discussion. And of course, you will be seeing this in my YouTube channel. Please like and subscribe and share it to your classmates. Okay, so I will now end my discussion and have a good day, and let's just have fun as we learn new things pertaining to our course, personal identification techniques. Yours truly is your Professor Dr. Jonna B. Badwa, saying thank you and see you in some other session.